Welcome to another edition of the MMA Lockcast. I'm your host, Manpreet, aka MMA Lock of the Night, your boy on social media at MMALOTN, and the architect behind the MMA Fight Archive, which you goddamn sure came in use and handy for me to study up on this PFL Africa card or PFL Cape Town card that I'm about to break down for you guys. But I got as many direct links as you could possibly find for all these fighters, so you know exactly what to expect when they step foot inside the cage on the weekends. We've just surpassed 5,500 fighter profiles, 120 subscribers as well. You guys can check it out for free as well with a 7-day free trial. Check the link in the description below. That is the MMA Fight Archive. All right. Let's talk about PFL Cape Town, which goes down Saturday morning, at least Eastern time. I believe the prelims start at 10 a.m. Eastern. It is headlined by a middleweight title fight between Johnny Eblen and Costello Van Steenis. And then in the co-main event, we got former PFL champion Dakota Ditcheva taking on Sumiko Inaba in just a regular fight. They should probably give her a title as well, but it is what it is. We never know what the hell's going on with the PFL and their champions and champion series and regional shows, all that type of stuff. This event is, apparently the main card is a PFL championship series event, while the prelims is a PFL Africa card. Again, it's just such a mess. Just put on the goddamn events and we can enjoy them. So normally, PFL Africa would be a regional event that I wouldn't make a video for, but considering they're lumping it together with the PFL Championship Series, I'll be dropping a breakdown for you. Obviously, if they do PFL Africa 2 without any type of championship series attached to it, I won't be doing a YouTube breakdown for it, but I will still have it in written form on the Lock of the Night Patreon page, which is where you can actually find the KSW breakdowns, because KSW also goes down at the same time as this PFL Africa card. I already got a few plays out for that, so make sure you guys check that out on the Lock of the Night Patreon page, link in the description below. Otherwise, let's get into this PFL Cape Town card, which I'm going to be honest, a ton of chalk. Not a lot of good betting opportunities on this card. I'll try to break down these fights as best as I can for you. There's a lot of chalk heavy spots, and for the most part, chalk will likely end up coming through. And a lot of unproven guys as well. A lot of people coming from the EFC promotion as well down there in South Africa. A lot of raw talent, a lot of athleticism as well, as you'll obviously see. But there's still a lot of proving that a lot of these fighters have to do as they start working through their MMA careers. So I'll obviously touch on that here. So let's get right into it. First matchup up, we got Juliet Ukah coming in at -150, going up against Kaylee Niedermayr, who comes in at +130. Now Ukah 6-0, makes her PFL debut after, I believe she won the majority of her fights by decision except her last one, which she won by TKO in the second round. She does a great job in terms of implementing pressure with her footwork. She likes to stalk her opponents, utilize straight shots down the pipe. She throws with a lot of speed, a lot of stinging power as well, but there's a lot of question marks about the defensive grappling side of her game and how she does in the clinch against somebody that's actually going to push her in that. There were a few takedown attempts against her in the tape that I've seen, and she was able to snuff them out even without even allowing her opponents to get deep on her hips at all. But I want to see her fend off takedowns up against the cage or fend off somebody looking to implement a clinch heavy approach, because that's what Niedermayr might look to do here, and that's where Ukah's going to get tested. Niedermayr comes from a kickboxing background as well, but I've seen some of the wins that she actually has. A lot of it came with her applying that pressure in the clinch up against the cage, looking to overwhelm her opponents and kind of just outmuscle them. On the feet, mediocre striking. She's been dinged up a bit by mediocre strikers as well. So that's, even though she comes from a kickboxing background, nothing special there. I favor Ukah here. I understand why she's -150. She looks more dangerous in terms of being able to implement effective damage, and I think she'll be able to do that. I think we'll see an urgency from her to get off the clinch and get off the cage, where Niedermayr might look to try to get off on some success there. But I think that we'll see Ukah land more damage and pull away with this in deep water and likely win her on the scorecards. I just want to see her defensive grappling tested a little bit so we know what we're getting here with this prospect. All right, next up, Abraham Babley coming in at minus 1100, going up against Paul Emmanuel Nadze, who comes in at plus 725. Not going to spend too much time on this one. Babley, big favorite for a reason. Much tougher strength of schedule. Not a pushover by any means. He lost on the World Tournament back in April, I think it was, or it was probably May, against Rodrigo Nascimento, and now he finds himself in the PFL Africa tournament. But strong, brooding, physical heavyweight. I expect him to apply that pressure here against Nadze, who looks to take off his opponent's heads early. He's big as well, much bigger than Babley, but I think he's going to struggle to get Babley off of him, and that will lead to Babley grinding this fight out. But minus 1100, not anything I want to be parlaying in a fight like this. All right, next up, Simbrache Hokonya coming in at plus 375, going up against Franz Mlambo, who comes in at minus 500. Now, Hokonya has a 4-0 record, I believe, 5-0 record. 4 of those wins coming by decision, one of them coming by first-round knockout. Looks to be a quick striker with decent combination, speed, and accuracy. He has some decent takedowns as well and a good top control game. His gas tank seems a little bit suspect, and that kind of impedes his ability to be effective in deeper water. Good athleticism, good ability to counter his opponents as well. Again, a lot of his speed has a lot to do with his success as well. But he's going up against a much more tenured, much more experienced fighter in Franz Mlambo, who's already competed for promotions like Brave CF, Bellator, and even PFL Europe, which is where he had his last couple fights. The last of which was December of 2023, where he came up short against Khurshid Kakarov in the PFL Europe finals there for his division, but he was unable to get the victory that night. But Kakarov, very, very tough, a ton of potential with that fighter as well. That snapped a 7-fight winning streak for Mlambo, but he's shown great improvements in his defensive grappling, which is where opponents often try to attack him to try to get him away from that length and reach that he normally brings to the table. And then obviously that striking advantage he often holds over his opponents. And I think he's going to have that advantage here over Hokonya. And I think that Hokonya might actually look to try to take this to the ground, but I think he's going to struggle to keep Mlambo there, and he might even find himself getting strangled here, as we know Mlambo has a good front choke series as well. I'm going to go Mlambo. I don't like the chalk because Hokonya is still a bit of a question mark to me. Again, clean striking, very fast with his hands. He might be able to clip Mlambo a few times, but I'm going to go with the experience of Mlambo. Just the chalk a little bit too much for my liking. All right, next up, we got Abdullah Kane coming in at minus 700, going up against Joffrey Houlton, who comes in at plus 500. Now, Kane is one that really jumped out to me in terms of a guy that looks like he has a ton of potential. He's only 3 fights into his professional career, but shows a very educated and calculated fighting style. He pressures well with his footwork, utilizes good combinations, mixes up the targets very well, from his leg kicks to knees to the body to punching the body, and then try to mix things up to the head. But he also does a good job in terms of implementing takedowns when he sees the openings for it, and then is able to smash his opponents from there. He's big, strong, very physical, very athletic as well, and this kid looks like he has a ton of potential. Now he's going up against Houlton, who is 7-4 as a professional, riding a 2-fight winning streak, both of those wins coming by finish. I believe all of his wins except one of them have come in the first round, but he's a guy that if you're able to nullify that early power striking approach that he tries to stalk with, you can break him. Especially if you're able to get him to the ground. He shows a little bit of resistance early, but if you work through that and can keep him on his back, this is a guy that will easily break, and I don't see where Kane will struggle with him. Obviously, Houlton can land a big shot to change the tide of this fight early, but if Kane can kind of be calculated just as he's shown in recent fights, he can kind of snuff out those big shots coming his way, drag Houlton to the ground, and I think he smashes him from that top position, and I think he finishes this fight within a round. I think Kane is one of the brighter prospects that a lot of people are going to start to take notice of as PFL Africa starts to move on here. So I'm going to go Kane and Kane by knockout. All right. Next up, we got Asigiashu Tshitamba. Nailed it. Coming in at plus 270, going up against Kareem Henniene, who comes in at minus 330. Now, Tshitamba, had a 3-fight losing streak between 2019 and 2021, but now finds himself on a 2-fight winning streak, with his most recent win coming by split decision back in April. He's just spent the entirety of his career with the EFC banner, which again is probably the premier promotion down there in South Africa. Decent striker, loves to engage in the grappling realm, but he's looked quite mediocre throughout all realms of mixed martial arts. He can be reversed. His control is decent against mediocre competition, but he's going up against a tough kid here in Henniene, who's mainly come up in the Canadian MMA scene, mainly training at either TriStar or H2O, which is famous for two-time PFL champion Olivier Aubin-Mercier. He went 5-0 as a pro from 2017 to 2020, and he's now 4-0 as a pro since turning to the pro ranks back in late 2022. He relies heavily on a grapple-heavy approach where he utilizes a ton of different techniques, so he's always keeping his opponents on their toes in terms of how he's looking to take them to the ground, whether they're trips, throws, or just a conventional double leg takedown. He does a great job in terms of timing those entries and then securing that top position and grinding opponents out. His cardio looks a little bit suspect considering the amount of energy he normally uses for his grapple-heavy approach, but he usually does a good job in terms of timing those takedowns and just catching breaths when he can so he can get back to the control type game that he brings to the table. Tshitamba could have some success picking apart Henniene from distance, but I think it's just a matter of time before Henniene gets a hold of him, drags him to the ground, and then just controls him from that top position. I think he wins this fight. The only thing giving me a little bit of pause in terms of being uber confident in the Canadian side here is that gas tank. Tshitamba looks dangerous enough that he could take advantage of that, but for the most part, I'm expecting Henniene to grind this out with that grappling and take home a decision victory. Our next up, we got Ditcheva coming in at plus 115, going up against Justin Clarke, who comes in at minus 135. Now, Awa actually fell short on Power Slap back in October, but now returns to mixed martial arts where he currently rides a 2-fight winning streak and has a 3-1 record overall. He's a big, brooding heavyweight that throws big power shots. His technique doesn't look horrible for someone of his size and as inexperienced as he is. And his last win came back in May of 2024, where he used a ton of leg kicks to finish his opponent in just about 90 seconds. Trains in Dubai, looks big, looks intimidating, but is a guy that I think that's going to struggle against guys that are technically superior than him and kind of stay away and are able to stay away from his power early. And I think Clarke is a guy that is capable of doing that. Now, Clarke trains alongside current UFC middleweight champion Dricus du Plessis, and he looks to make a name for himself under the PFL banner. He's coming off 2 first-round finishes, although they were against very low-level competition. The first was a 1-8 old man who he finished in just about 30 seconds. And then the second one was against a wild slugger who seemed to punch himself out within 2 minutes or so, I think it was. And then once Clarke landed a knee to the body, he just seemed to quit. But from what I was able to uncover from Clarke and seeing some of the footage on him, he looks like a solid fighter. It looks like he has technique down properly. He's very athletic, very strong, very explosive. Striking defense looks proper, outside of dealing with somebody that throws as recklessly as his last opponent does. Durability looks on point as well. And technically speaking, I think he's superior to Awa here. I see why the line is as close as it is. Both guys quite inexperienced, but considering the training partners that Clarke has, getting him ready for these types of performances, I think he'll go out there and showcase that he's a much more complete mixed martial artist. I'd have a little bit more confidence if there was more viable tape, but from the little I've been able to uncover about both of these guys, I think Clarke should win this matchup, and I think he's going to come through with the knockout. All right, next up, we got Shannon Van Tonder coming in at minus 120, going up against Bula Godogo, who comes in at plus 100. Now, Van Tonder actually was closer to minus 160 just yesterday, and a ton of money has been coming in on the Godogo side, which made this nearly a pick'em, but there was some money coming back in on the South African fighter Van Tonder, which is now bringing him up to a slight favorite number at minus 120. Comes into the PFL with a 7-2 record, went 7-1 with EFC, largely fought mediocre competition the entire way. He avenged his only loss with the promotion in his last fight, outworking his opponent over 50 15 minutes and winning that fight on the scorecards. He looks to be a decent Muay Thai striker, but also likes to get to his BJJ game when he sees the openings there. He does a good job in terms of taking his opponent's back and sinking in the rear naked choke, but I really want to see a little bit more effort from him in terms of being a little bit more assertive with his striking so he can open up better wrestling opportunities for himself. Now, he's going up against Godogo here, who comes in with a clean 3-0 record, but will be his first fight in over 3 years away from action. He was scheduled to compete for Aries FC back in 2014, but that fell short. I believe it was due to an injury. He's quite inexperienced as a pro, although he has had a handful of amateur fights back in 2019. He looks very athletic, has some solid power in his shots. I just have questions about him going up against guys that are technically superior than him. He seems a tad lost on the ground, although he's relied a lot on his physicality and explosiveness to get out of some bad spots, similar to Derek Lewis in a sense. But I'm curious to see what kind of improvements he's been making over the last 3 years and if he's going to be a completely different fighter than what we've seen on tape. I have to lean ever so slightly to the Van Tonder side because it looks like he's a little bit more complete and a little bit more technically sound. And I think if he can get this fight to the ground, I think his BJJ will be superior to Godogo. But the physicality and athleticism of Godogo makes things a little bit interesting. That's where it seems like he really can even the playing field. But I think Van Tonder is just a little bit slicker. Unless he becomes an underdog, I don't know if I'll really pull the trigger on him there. But in terms of an actual prediction, I'll pick him to win this matchup by submission. All right, next up, we got Maxwell John Tunana coming in at minus 800, going up against Mikhail Groguhe, who comes in at plus 550. Now, Nana is a guy that I originally came across back in August when he fought for the PFL and took on a tough opponent who he was able to pick apart and eventually finish at the ending of the second round. Nana comes from a combat sambo background, but moves very well for a guy his size, utilizing good striking, good combinations, good kicks, some crafty takedowns as well. But he's very well versed in the striking game, which is where he is most dangerous. Throws with great technique, solid power, mixes up his targets very well, trains under Manchester top team as well, under the all-wise Carl Prince, alongside Abraham Babli. Lerone Murphy is obviously training out of that gym as well. So he has a solid group of guys that he can really lean on to continue to improve his game. But in terms of the raw talent that he has, very, very good. And he should be able to style on Mikhail Groguhe here, who is a very, 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 very poor man's version of Derek Lewis in the sense that throws with bombs, throws with absolute heat, has some decent durability at times and things that he can work through. But in his losses has been caught pretty quickly by his opponents, most notably where he went up against Islam Mazraf a couple years ago back in PFL Europe, and that was a fight where it just looked like he was uninterested in the fight, even with the fight starting, and then he just slowly just slugs his way to the middle of the cage and gets quickly caught by a head kick by Mazraf. I'm sure everybody remembers that that whole debacle there. But after that, he's had 2 fights, I believe. He's now 2-0, showing a little bit more urgency and willingness to fight from the jump. But he still has a lot of holes in his game. He can be held up against the cage. His takedown defense is not that great. He's a little bit slow, especially after the first couple minutes. And I think this is a matchup where Nana can easily pick him apart and probably finish him within 2 rounds as well. So Grogu could land that nuclear bomb, right? That it's absolutely possible. But for the most part, I expect Nana to, tread at distance, set up some traps, spring them on him, and eventually find the knockout within 2 rounds. All right. Next up, the last fight on the PFL Africa prelim card here, Nkosi and Ndebele coming in at minus 1,400, going up against Mahmoud Atef, who comes in at plus 800. Now, Ndebele is one of the better talents to come out of South Africa, and he's looking to start, a different chapter in his career after putting together an 8-3 run under the Brave CF banner. I think his breakout performances were both of his wins against Jose Shorty Torres, who had a storied amateur career. I think he went 25-0 or something like that. He was 11-1 after that first win that he had over Ndebele, but then he was able to reverse the fortune there and beat Jose Torres twice in a row, finishing that first time. But a lot of it had to do with his striking. He's very sharp, utilizing his length, his speed, his accuracy, has a ton of oomph behind his shots as well that really hurts opponents, and his defensive grappling is very high level, and even those Jose Torres fights shows that. He was able to defend the takedowns, even if he did get taken down, quickly work back to his feet, and then get back to his damage-based style. And I expect him to run through a guy here in Mahmoud Atef, who's just not good. Let's just be honest. He went 3-2 with UAE Warriors, 5-2 overall. He's finished most of his opponents, but he's not that good. Like a lot of the guys that he's been finishing very, very low level, has some decent striking, but bad striking defense, throws shots with his chin up in the air, which is obviously a big no-no. And I expect Ndebele to make quick work of him. If Ndebele doesn't finish him within a round here, I think it will be considered a loss for the South African fighter, but I think that we'll see Ndebele land those big shots, and I think he'll finish him pretty quickly. One of the very few instances where I'd be okay with you parlaying somebody in the -1,000 range, because I think there's a big enough skill discrepancy here that Ndebele should be able to get this one pretty convincingly. All right. Let's move over to the main card now, the PFL Championship Series, if that's what they want to call it. We got Corey Anderson coming in at +130, going up against Dennis Goltsov, who comes in at -150. Now, last we saw, Corey Anderson was the Bellator light heavyweight champion after Vadim Nemkov moved up to heavyweight. But I'm not sure what they're doing with the titles anymore, so Anderson is moving up to heavyweight to take on Dennis Goltsov here, who just came off that PFL Championship winning performance back in November where he was able to submit Oleg Popov. But Anderson is still a solid fighter. I believe he's 5-1 now since leaving the UFC. His lone loss coming to Vadim Nemkov. Utilizes good pace, good pressure, good volume, good output with his striking, throws in solid combinations, and then mixes in his takedowns very well behind it. And I think, even with the size advantage of Dennis Goltsov, I think that's something that Anderson can be really effective with here. Goltsov's wrestling is good, but it's nothing special, right? Like, there have been guys that have been grinding him out in the past, and the reason that he came up short in so many of those PFO seasons was that he just couldn't grind through those last waning moments in a lot of these fights where Ante Delia was able to defeat him, or even Henniene Ferreira was able to knock him out in the second round of their matchup. So there are some mistakes that Goltsov has made, and I think a veteran like Anderson can definitely take advantage of that. And I think that's a big part of the reason why we're seeing this line come down as much as we are. I think Anderson was closer to that +200, +185 range earlier this week. Now he finds himself at +130. He has all the tools to win this fight. The big concern, obviously, is the fact that, Anderson's durability has been a bit of a question mark, but it's been 5.5 years since he's been knocked out, and we've seen him eat some big shots from some heavy hitters since then as well. So I think he'll be able to avoid most of that striking danger from Goltsov. I think he can set his pace. I think he can set his grind, and I think he eventually grinds Goltsov out here, pulls off the upset, and wins this fight on the scorecards. All right, next up, we got Makasharep Zaynukov coming in at -905, going up against Takeshi Izumi, who comes in at +605. Not really understanding the Izumi signing outside of the fact that he picked up the biggest win of his career in his last matchup against Spike Carlisle. I believe that was for the Risen promotion. But Zaynukov, 5 straight wins in a row as of right now. Did a great job in terms of smothering and outworking Dedrick Sanders. Trains out of the Nurmagomedov gym, has mixed it up at AKA as well. Solid takedowns, great top control, good gas tank to go 15 minutes if he needs to. And his losses have really only come against very high-level competition. So even though he's not undefeated, still a very solid prospect to keep an eye on in the PFL roster. Izumi, I don't really understand what he's good at. I thought he lost the Spike Carlisle fight, actually, now that I'm thinking about it. Back and forth matchup, 6-3 salty record. He has a few wins over some uber experienced and aging Japanese veterans, but this is going to be the toughest fighter he's faced to date, and I think he's going to get smothered here. So I think Zaynukov wins this fight without much issue. Another spot, again, I'm if you guys have been following me for a while, I'm very much against parlaying like chalk above minus 800, but I feel there's a big enough skill discrepancy here that it's kind of warranted that I wouldn't mind if anybody wanted to parlay Zaynukov here. But I think he wins. I think he smothers Izumi, and I think he wins this fight on the scorecards. All right, interesting matchup here as AG McKee Jr. goes back down to the featherweight division, coming in at minus 260, going up against Ahmed Magomedov, who comes in at plus 220. Now, McKee is looking to bounce back from his second pro loss after he had lost to Paul Hughes. I believe that was I think that was late last year. Yeah, back in October. He wants to go back to 145 pounds after he had put together a decent 4-0 run in the lightweight division before coming across Paul Hughes. But he feels like he can get his best work done at 145 pounds. And I have to agree. His length, his reach, his physicality, a lot of that was to his benefit at the 145-pound division. And if he's not really killing himself to make that weight class and he can still compete there, I think he's better off doing that. And I think that had a lot to do with him losing against a bigger fighter in Paul Hughes last time around. Couldn't get to his takedowns, couldn't get to his game, was getting, rocked and hurt a ton in that fight by the better striker. And I think he realized that, hence why he's going back down to 145 pounds. Normally has some good distance striking, has a very slick submission game as we've seen in the past. And I think that's going to be very important for him to utilize here against Ahmed Magomedov, who, you guessed it, loves to wrestle. A guy that really wants to take opponents to the ground, try to implement that smothering top position. He managed to bounce back from his first pro loss that he suffered at the hands of veteran Henry Corrales back in February of 2023. Couldn't get to his takedowns, got outboxed, and ended up losing on the scorecards there. But he returned from 2 years away from action and was able to just smother and destroy Nathan Kelly. After a little bit of a scare in the first round, let's be honest, Nathan Kelly did hurt him, nearly finished him, but Magomedov jumped back into that, was able to get to his takedowns, and that second round was just hilarious. If you have the opportunity, I would say go back, watch that second round, and just put it on like 2 times speed or 3 times speed. And it was hilarious just to see Magomedov immediately get the takedown and then slowly work his way to the full mount, get to the back, sink in the choke, and get the finish. Like, there was no back step that Magomedov even took in that second round because he just slowly broke Nathan Kelly down, got the position he needed, and then eventually got the finish. He's a great fighter, fun fighter, very difficult fighter, and still only 29, but I think he's up against it here in AJ McKee, who's the better striker, very slick with the submission game. I think his wrestling will help him stay away from too much danger from Magomedov, and even if Magomedov lands some takedown and gets some control time, I think it's going to be McKee that's utilizing enough defense, but also landing enough damage and threatening with submissions that's going to cause Magomedov to either slow down and give up a finish late, or just continuously give up damage, and that will allow McKee to win this fight on the scorecard. So it was weird. Within the last 24 hours, I saw McKee minus 260. I saw him drop down to minus 205, which is a very bettable line in my opinion. Now he's back up to minus 260. We don't want to completely write off Magomedov, but I think this is a very winnable fight for McKee Jr. And I think he wins this either by submission, or I think he just lands more damage and wins this fight on the scorecards. All right, co-main event. No need to spend too much time on this. We got Dakota Ditcheva coming in at minus 5,000, going up against Sumiko Inaba, who comes in at plus 1,800. Ditcheva is better than Inaba everywhere. Inaba normally utilizes her striking, but she's going to get absolutely torched on the feet here. I think Ditcheva wins this fight wherever she wants. And if she does not finish it within 2 rounds, I will be very, very surprised. Does that mean I'm willing to take the very chalky under 1.5 line? No, this is women's MMA at the end of the day, and maybe Inaba shows up and rises to the occasion to a certain extent. But I don't think it's going to produce an upset of any sort. I think Ditcheva does what she needs here. She gets that emphatic finish and hopefully continues to fight out her PFL contract so we can see her in the UFC sooner than later. But she should dominate Inaba here. TKO, submission, doesn't matter. I think she wins with relative ease, but I would be a little bit cautious about that under, just in case this does start to leak into the late second round, early third round, but I am expecting Ditcheva to get that finish. All right, main event now where we got Johnny Eblen coming in at minus 510, going up against Costello Van Steenis, who comes in at plus 385. Now, Eblen, the longtime Bellator champion, undefeated, 16-0. I don't know if he's defending his Bellator / PFL title here or if they're fighting for a vacant PFL title. Again, PFL is just such a mess with their formatting and titling their promotions and the events and the titles and all this stuff. There's a world tournament champion, then there's a champion. I don't get it. But Johnny Eblen is a champion. Let's just put it that way. Great fighter. Besides round 5 last time around, he pretty much shut out Fabian Edwards in their rematch back in October. That was the third time that Eblen had defended his title, moved his record to 16-0. Probably the best middleweight outside of the UFC, and it would be nice if he would be able to get to the UFC. But he is, I think, 32, 33 years old, so I'm not sure if he'll be able to make that jump. Patricio Pitbull did. He was 37, 38, so maybe there is an opportunity for Eblen, especially if he continues to keep his undefeated record intact. What made him so good originally was his wrestling game. Very good top pressure, very good entries, great cardio to go 15, 25 minutes if you need to put that pressure on his opponents and grind them out. And his hands have just improved throughout his career, which has led to him even landing a few knockout victories as well. Van Steenis, respectable 16-3 record, rides a 2-fight winning streak. He's the first guy to actually hand Fabian Edwards a loss back in the day. I believe it's been a couple years now. He came up short in a competitive battle against Douglas Lima when it seemed like Lima was really on the out, so not a good look for him there. He's had back-to-back finishes. Decent striker, good grappling game as well. Trains alongside Gegard Mousasi, who we know was one of the best to ever do it. Just a tough matchup for him, though. I think Eblen pretty much has him beat in every aspect of this fight. Maybe Van Steenis has a little bit of success in the striking realm if he's able to defend a few takedowns here and force Eblen to strike with him a little bit more than he should. But I think he's going to struggle. I think Eblen just dictates the pace here, gets to his grind, takes this. I think the over 3.5 is roughly around minus 200. A little bit chalky, but Van Steenis is durable. He's tough to put away. I think he'll put up enough of a fight to see the 4th and 5th rounds, but I think it's ultimately going to be the champion that I think he's defending his title. I think he gets another successful title defense here. So I'm going to take Johnny Eblen to win by decision, and I don't mind the chalk on him either. All right. There you guys go. PFL Cape Town broken down for you guys. Reminder, it starts at 10 a.m. Eastern on Saturday, so don't get caught napping there. I have a few official plays already for it. You guys can find that on the Lock of the Night Patreon page. I'll pin it in the comments section below as well. Otherwise, again, chalk heavy card. Be wary. Don't get too carried away with all the chalk here. Pick your spots. Hopefully you can come out on the back end with some profit here. All right. Good luck on all your action, folks. I'll see you guys a little bit later for the UFC 318 prop drop, where we talk about all the props for that UFC pay-per-view card. Otherwise, good luck, and I'll see you guys then. Peace.
Last thing.